Welcome back. We're talking national minimum wage. What are your thoughts? What are your questions around this issue? We're hearing two sides of this equation, saying that it's too much. Some are saying it's too little. What is the story here? What can you afford to live on? And will this help? We've heard that 47% of those people currently employed, at the moment are below that threshold right now. So there's a lot of people whose life would improve tremendously if this amount of 3,500 Rand was introduced straight away. But just before the break, we're talking about the SMME sector, which is going to be the one that's going to create the most jobs, but they'll feel the biggest shock, I suspect, in terms of legislation such as this.
No, definitely, Peter. But we are going to put meaning to collective bargaining, for sure, because it's not going to be easy answers. When you go back to the document as put out by the researchers, it actually does look at the different categories, including, as President Sdumo said, including aspects around the young people who are just starting, about SMEs. But if we do not go out there, as we usually don't as South Africa, go out there and talk to people and explain this, somebody who is looking for a job or working will not understand that they are being employed by a small company and that there's another category. So we have to go out there and talk to our people so we understand that there could be a problem. My biggest trepidation is that people will lose their jobs. Let's say somebody says, 3,500, I'd rather not have a domestic worker, or I'd rather fire my workers. And that's the balance we have to work at so people do not lose jobs. I also worry about more casualization. Okay, maybe I'll have someone come in and help me with packaging on Mondays and Thursdays, and during the 2-3 days I won't have someone. I'll have someone come and do my laundry, clean my house once a week, and then I won't have anybody. That impact we need to try and arrest, so our people do not lose the crucial jobs that they depend on. But the other worry that just having read the document worries me, and just engaging, is that for big business, they might just say, well, I used to start people at 5,000. Now they're saying 3,000. That's where I'm going to be. I'll be 3,500, even if they know that's not what they should pay people. And if we do not get into a discussion that will make those things perfectly clear, our people are going to continue to suffer. Because we can have the categories, but if you think about it, it's the management of those categories to make sure that each one for that, and it's done properly. Because if it's not, we'll have more upheaval than what we're having now.
All right, so if I'm hearing you, what you're suggesting is that there's going to be different minimum wages for different sectors at different levels. Is that?
That's the proposal in the document that has come out from the researchers.
But doesn't that defeat the whole idea of a minimum wage?
No, it doesn't. From the point of view that we all agree, the baseline is that there should be a minimum wage for everyone. Just like somebody starting up in a company, they might earn this, and another one who's been there for a while and something else. The reality of the situation is that we have to look at not squeezing out the small, medium enterprises and the startups, and ensuring that the people who are going there understand. So that's the job that we have to deal with, the unions, us from business, to educate and work with our partners within Nedlac as the community as well, to make sure that we balance the equation. I think people might not understand, but this is going to be one of the biggest challenges. Just navigating what we've just spoken about, but getting people to understand what Clive has spoken about. Frankly, we can't afford it. However, from a humane and fair point of view, because the fair must come in, we've got to have a basic minimum wage, because there is a lot of exploitation out there. We've got to accept that as a nation and tick that box and say, what do we do about it? It will need all of us. And those of us sitting at Nedlac will have to have cool, sober heads moving forward to ensure that we take the interest of everybody and make sure that one side doesn't prevail over the other, but it's definite collective bargaining and coming up with a solution. And I trust in the people of South Africa. Some people might not trust South Africa. I do. I think we will be able to come up with a solution that will be palatable in the end. We might not all get what we want, but we might get something that will get us started to go somewhere.
Thanks. I wanted to chip in there to say the legislated national minimum wage does not intend to give an easy way out for employers. Particularly, there are collective agreements that exist. Bargaining structures must continue to negotiate for their members for increments. This doesn't deter them from doing that. The sectoral determination processes by government are still standing. We have to talk also, which is what the document is also raising, which is an issue that is objected to by others, the extension of the collective agreements to those who are vulnerable and are not necessarily covered in those bargaining councils of agreements that are reached there, so that we cover them. It's an issue that is there. So I wanted to chip in on that to say, yes, there should be protection of everybody here.
Okay, Mr. Mkhwanazi.
I think we need to, for example, the South African model that we have at the moment of the minimum wage is usually variation down. So, for example, the collective agreements allows for exemptions. We need to look at the model that works for us. And I'm not sure whether the model that we have at the moment is working for all of us, because there was a point that was made about the employers that are already paying above the minimum. So what do? The German model talks about variation upwards. So we need to find a model that is working, and I think that's when then collective bargaining through bargaining councils can therefore play a role in terms of dealing with those particular issues and discussions, therefore,
Right.
and social dialogue.
Variation upwards means there is a point at which nobody can go below.
Yes.
Namaganjan.
Yes.
However, if we do get to that point, it's quite clear some jobs are going to disappear. That's a fact.
Not
We're going to
necessarily.
destroy some jobs. Agricultural sector, the farmer is going to say, I've been thinking about mechanizing. This now is going to push me over the edge because it's going to be cheaper for me to put machines than X number of employees at 3,500 Rand a month.
Dr. Baloyi has said how we communicate out there. Because at the beginning, of course, there shall be opportunistic, we don't understand, we understand the minimum wage to be saying I must retrench my employees because I won't afford. But when you get to talk more into saying, how have we accommodated your case, which is understood by the negotiators, let's allow that to happen.
Because again, you said variation upwards. So let's say the line is set at 3,500. Are you saying that Mr. Farmer can pay less than that?
You see, there are two categories of examples they put in the document. First, they pick on the domestic workers. And they put a particular percentage of the proposed.
So they're going to be 2,700
they put
instead.
things around that and also say, but there is a sectoral determination that is catering for them. And then they say the agricultural workers, as a second example, they put a particular percentage. So it's researched to say we shall be able to cover
But then we
this one.
don't have a minimum wage.
We do.
We do.
We do.
How do we have a minimum wage if this amount varies? If I'm a domestic worker, I'm getting 2.7 because it's been determined that I'm getting 75% of the minimum wage, and somebody else is getting more.
It's being realistic, truly.
You know, we have to be realistic, as he says. We have to look at the different categories. And I like the point that was made by Clive during the break, that we are a unique country, we are a unique society. The issues that we have are unique in a lot of ways. We're not a Germany, we're not a USA, those are mature economies. However, there are lessons learned always from those economies.
So here's my situation. We've got Jabu, who's a full court attendant, and we've got Sheila, who's a domestic worker. A loaf of bread costs the same for both of them. Transport, when they get into the taxi, costs the same for both of them. But what you're suggesting is Sheila is going to get 70% of the minimum wage, whereas Jabu is going to get 101%. But their cost to their lives is the same. Surely that's unfair.
We have said, Peter, the national minimum wage is not a panacea to these problems. That's why we talk about a comprehensive social security, which negotiations are beginning right now at Nedlac. That's why we'll talk of issues like NHI, the National Health Insurance. We're talking about free higher education for the poor. It's a range of these public policy issues that we must engage. And we're on this one. We're going to the other.
But look at the opposite of it.
Yeah.
It's either you look at affordability or nothing. Then it means the person loses the job altogether.
Right.
Rather, we look at the different categories of affordability, and then all of the other things will kick in to make it a little easier on the person. And we accept it is not a result that we might all be happy with. That's what I opened with. It will be a lot of give and take to ensure that we save the jobs rather than lose them totally.
Clive, have we got models? I mean, you know, I know South Africa is fairly unique.
Yeah.
There are 54 countries on the continent. What have the other countries done with this question? Because, you know, we've all gone through colonial past. There's been this differential. What have they done? And are there other countries, developing countries, Mexico's, Brazil's perhaps? How have they dealt with this?
Well, maybe you should look at the one country that is leading in terms of the highest minimum wage paid, which is Australia. And you can look at the economy, you can study the mining sector. You and I we had a conversation about that and how they make sure that obviously they are able to enhance people's lives. But you look at the skills level of those people, it forces them, therefore, to make sure that they have a minimum wage like that, which is across the country for everyone. $15, that's the average for everybody per hour. So that model, obviously, it makes sense to them, and it's been working. It's the same as if you have a look at Denmark, for example. People in Denmark, over 70% of the population is got a high, is educated. You know, they've gone post the basic education. So the guys, they are forced, therefore, then to make sure that there is a minimum wage. It's the same in the UK. Most of the people there also have advanced education, so that means that obviously the minimum wage can go across all sectors at the same page, because I think it's about £11. So why is South Africa a slightly different situation is because not only do we have a high unemployment rate, but our skills level are pretty low. So we need to start thinking, how do we advance our skills? How do we get people to get into jobs? And then you've got another situation where if you look at our middle class, From 2004, when we globalized, we didn't realize this, I think, at the time, but we are a heavily over-indebted country. The people are so indebted that increasing salary does not necessarily mean a better standard of living. It means more going back to the banks. And so we need to think about how do we therefore, our government talks about the missing middle. That missing middle is a crucial part of making sure that if you want to sustain an economy, those people need to be assisted. They need to be supported. And somehow, if we can support them and make sure that they are able to live within a fair standard of living, then you'll see the country actually start to actually pump in and creating more demand. The last thing I just want to add, why these countries are successful in applying the minimum wage is because they are able to also forge new industries. Now, in any change of policy, in any change, Peter, you know this, that there will be casualties. There will be people who will not be happy, as my panelists have said here. What we need to find out is what is the better sacrifice? Is a sacrifice for the country to say we want the country to move forward and we want an inclusive economy that everybody can support. And of course, big business must participate. We can't just ignore them. And so they have to also come to the platform. But most importantly, a strong economy anywhere in the world. The United States has the biggest economy in the world. China, for example, you have a very strong middle class. And you only create a middle class like that when the people can afford living. And how do you do that in this country? We need to go back and say, what enabled people to actually start earning that kind of money when they did back after 1994? Is there a way? And this is where I personally, and people will critique me on this, but I always say, it seems like our South African Reserve Bank does not participate fully in these particular issues. We need to ask, can there not be some sort of, I don't know, we've heard of different models. I've spoken to you before about helicopter money, for example, where the government makes access available to money. We can't print our own money, and we have to go back to the UK and ask them to assist us. So those kinds of issues need to be settled. And once we have a strong middle class, this country can do such wonderful things, and we need to create new industries that are relevant to where we are going. We are in the fourth industrial generation. We need to start preparing now. How do we get there and take our people with us?
All right, okay. Well, let's now start getting some questions from the floor and also you at home. Let's start with Becky Gumbi, who's on table number 2. Becky, what's your question?
Thank you very much, Peter, and greeting to panelists. We are missing one view in your panel, the researcher report. If there is a view on the side of research that says big factories, how much they do or they make after they've paid their employees the profit, would be in a position to say what should do from now. But one would say the minimum wage is needed, but we need to categorize them because the environment are not the same. But we feel that it needs to go parallel with the unemployment grant. Because if we deal with this minimum wage and we silent on this issue, because the jobs are being lost every day. So we need to package the two. When we agree on this, then we need to say something on unemployment grant so that we address this issue once and for all. I thank you.
Okay, all right. I don't know who wants to pick that one up.
Well, I fully agree with Mr. Gumbi, and indeed the report says something about what ought to be the role of big employers, whilst appreciating the role of the SMMEs and their squeeze in the potential of introducing a national minimum wage. The point is raising, indeed, we have ignored that aspect for a while now. I know that Cosatu years back has been raising what they call the basic incomes grant, which tries to accommodate those. From government side, I know that they are working hard on the UIF for those who lose employment right now to improve on it, extending it from 9 months to 12 months, 3 months is still too little. And even aiming to help those who are on maternity leave but happen to lose their babies before they give birth, miscarriages, who now would qualify to claim as if they were on full maternity leave. It's all those things and many other public policies that we must work hard to really accommodate that. It's a very, very valid point.
Okay, Shane Choshan.
Thanks, Peter. Mine is actually on compliance. We live in a country where compliance really is not being taken seriously, and that debate is not actually debated along the minimum wage. We need to really appreciate the amount that has been put. It will definitely take many workers out of slavery wages. I mean, the businesses can really afford that amount, and we should really avoid the issue where we narrow these things to domestic workers. I mean, many companies will definitely afford that, and it will ensure that people get a fair wages at the end of the day. Thank you.
Okay, so compliance. How do you monitor this thing? Because the employee who's desperate for a job is not going to report his employer for paying him below minimum wage. How do we manage this?
That's where therefore bargaining councils play a role in terms of enforcement. We know that the Department of Labor is struggling in terms of the enforcement of the sectoral determinations as they exist right now. So if we take the structures that exist, that have been well functioning for some time, and we build capacity on them, and to ensure that when we put whatever minimum wage that we put in place, it is enforced, because it's no use putting in a minimum wage and then there's no enforcement into the process. So I think for me,
desperation is a really serious thing, and people will do anything for a loaf of bread. They're not going to report. They're not going to help.
Look, Peter, yes, we must rely on the Department of Labor and their inspectors. We must rely on the good heart of employers. But with the workers, and I see there are many trade unions here, look, it's up to us to organize workers on the ground and ensure that they are organized into our unions, cutting across, so that they monitor this themselves. We have to strengthen ourselves. No one will do it for us. Let's just ensure we strengthen our participation in this, in our unions, and monitor this. Because rogue employers will do that exactly. They are doing it with the newly amendment legislation on labor, on the labor brokers issue. The law says 3 months the employee is deemed to be permanent in that workplace. And that says the employee must be registered on a permanent basis. It is the law in South Africa. But employers simply recycle workers, or they don't do that, and workers lose jobs.
Okay. Right. Sediko Rakulot, table number 7. All right, we'll get a microphone to you. Keep standing. Whilst the microphone is coming, gender. There's always been a disparity for some reason between men and women. Is this going to partly fix that? Dr. Baloyi?
Hope. That is an ongoing battle, as far as, South Africa and the world, actually, to balance the two. I don't think this differentiates between men and women. The laws are very clear, it's for everybody. But I want to underscore the point on policing. And us being the voice of those who are voiceless and those who are in leadership position monitoring what is happening out there. Because indeed, when I have nowhere else to go, I'll be afraid to speak. But like both of them said, the bargaining council, the unions are there to speak on behalf of people who are in desperate situations like those. Because together, really, we can have a much stronger voice, but alone is tougher.
Okay.
I think we should guard against talking about protecting jobs and promoting slavery. Because we can say, no, we are going to lose jobs, but in the same time, promoting slavery. Because there is this one guy who said, the issue is not about jobs. Even the slaves had jobs. The issue is about wages. And at the core of the national minimum wage is addressing the issues of inequality. Will 3,500 to a teller at ShopRite close the gap between that teller and the salary of a white person who gets 50 million rand per annum? So when we discuss these things, we should check that. Is this amount addressing inequality? Thank you.
It's not.
Okay. So you're an economist. I'm going to start with you, Clive. How do you deal with inequality?
We have to decide what kind of country we want to be. If we want to be a communist country, then by all means. If you want to be a democratic, constitutional democracy that we are, we have to make aggressive adjustments to how we decide to move forward. So I'll give you an example. If we're a capitalist nation, which is the United States and most developed markets are, it's going to be very difficult. But if we're saying that we want a level playing field for everyone, we have to change the rules. We need to change our Company Act. They need to meet. We have to say, for example, I've mentioned this before, that there is no stringent measures for listed JSE companies to adapt BEE or triple BEE. There isn't. It's non-existent. And that's the reason why the JSE is 97% white and 3% black. So how do we transform that? How do we change that? There needs to be legislation. There needs to be law that you can be able to force. And obviously, like I said, there will be casualties. There will be people who will say, we're going to lose. And that's, unfortunately, that's the reality. The guys say, well, if you're going to be making it so hard for us, therefore, to work in your country, we might as well find business elsewhere. But we have to be able to strike that balance. The inequality issue is a historical one. And if we're serious about addressing the issues of our past, we need to make laws that show that we're dead serious about it and implement it. And that's one of the reasons why you have to have private sector participate, because every time you touch the issue of inequality and wages, then the guys say, well, why am I still here? And then you get job cuts, which follows after that. So the shareholders of these companies must come to the floor, must be able to say, listen, this is how we want to build this country, and we want our government to make sure that it's implemented.
Look, Peter, agreeing with what Clive is saying, South Africa, just imagine a big round cake, and it's enough for all of us to share and be happy. But what is happening in South Africa, because of those disparities and people refusing to share, that's why I support Bom Zwanele Manyi and others who are saying this matter has not been tempered. The wealth of this country still reserves in the hands of the few minorities, white male, in South Africa. And they don't want to share that. No national minimum wage will solve that problem. It doesn't aim to solve that problem, to answer Comrade Sediko's question. But all what it tries to do is to create that base. But until we tinker and tamper with this problem, white monopoly capital in South Africa.
All right, I'm going to ask a question, because I want to know if the numbers add up, because I've been, people have put it out there. There is this cake, and it is disproportionately shared. But for everyone to get what they need, there actually isn't enough cake. We actually have to create more, isn't it?
Yes.
And so sometimes we can get fixated in saying white monopoly capital and lose sight of the fact that actually we need to be growing this cake much bigger than it is at the moment.
Yes, it's easier said than done. And I'll tell you why. Because post-94, the word tinker was used by someone before. We tinkered with changes. We actually never effected the changes. That's the bottom line. We never really, this government was given the mandate to change, and we didn't. And as my daughter likes to say, Mommy, did we just fit in? We did. We fitted in. And that is the problem. We cannot even talk about balancing nor changing what is wrong, because if you do, you are attacked. The reality is that South Africa has to accept the fact that we are a hugely unequal society. And if we have to get to the second base, we've got to deal with the inequalities. Comrade Sidiko is right. We don't want slave wages, but we have a historical fact of serious inequality that gives us no other option but a base that is so low to start from. Sometimes I ask myself, when we don't take the fight to the people who need to transform, because we can't transform amongst ourselves as black business, for instance, or as black people. The people who need to transform are the ones who have to come to the party and understand that if we don't change South Africa will go up in smoke. South Africa will go up in smoke, because if I'm sitting nicely in my house and there's somebody sitting out there desperate, not having a meal, not being able to take their children to school, not being able to do the basics, South Africa is in trouble. And the sooner we realize that and not look at things in the periphery that, in my view, are trying to discourage us from dealing with the real issue of inequality, we are not really going to solve the problem. And it's a real problem. This minimum wage really shouldn't be a problem if Australia is doing it, if England is doing it, etc., etc. But it's a problem because we are starting from a base of inequality that is so dire that needs to be tackled. We have to start by defocusing on each other and little things that don't matter, and deal with the elephant in the room, the disparity in the lives of South African people. That is the problem.
Okay. All right, we'll take a brief moment, and when we come back, all right, in fact, let's go to table number 2, where Spumile Mtombela is sitting. Where are you? Okay.
Thank you, Peter. I think I'll start by saying, the businessman wants to make as much profit as possible with as minimum cost as possible. That's my beginning point. Now, I have been working for the private sector for the past 17 years, where one maybe had an opportunity to look at things, maybe from being an employer and employee going a little bit closer to the management side where things happen. That's why my question is directly directed to the president of Cosatu to say, wouldn't you think that this 3,500 is actually still promoting the cheap labor, which focuses more, which is imposed more to black people? Because if you're looking at this situation, it's affecting us. If you look at these big companies that we're saying are not creating jobs anymore, in fact, they are creating jobs. What they're doing is that they stop employing people and outsource jobs to Mr. Fenter, who was a manager here, and then he goes and opens up his shop and then hires. Let me just pause at that point and say, the deputy president announced, I think last week he was in the parliament answering questions. He said there is about 70,000, Clive has spoken about skills, 70,000 artisans who have been trained by up to so far. Now the question would be that if we don't have skills, where are those artisans? Where do they get distributed? They get distributed like this. Now the big company can't take the artisan, but because Mr. Fenton has his small shop, he will use you as an artisan because you don't have any employment. He is still getting his maximum profit, but you will understand that he's got his shop now. You will have to get the 2,000 then from his shop because you're just working so that you have meal in your table.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, would Cosatu now as the union see this as not promoting the cheap labor amongst the blacks as it still used to happen and still continuing? And I still feel that, as Comrade Kombi said, we need that research that says companies are doing so much, they can afford so much, because the jobs actually are coming from the medium-sized companies, which are most factories that you see around.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, you can answer that question. Stay with us, and don't forget #TNA BizBrief at Morning Live SABC. We'll pick up your tweets and your thoughts and your questions.